You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Season ticket holders and lifelong fans with neighborhood ties discuss Cubs news and neighborhood happenings. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 326 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin and he's high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
It's a beautiful night in the neighborhood, Jeremy.
It is a beautiful Chicago evening. Not too hot, not too cold. Just enjoying the beautiful weather. Looking forward to getting out into this weather tomorrow as the Cubs return back after a road trip for an upcoming homestand. We will preview that homestand. Pat and I will both be at the game on Monday. We will talk all about the week that will be. We're going to recap the week that was, because it was a very successful week for the Cubs, and all the news and happenings of the week as well. And to help us break down all of the happenings going on with the Chicago Cubs, friend of the show, you know him from his work at CHGO, Cody Delmendo. Thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Reoccurring guest officialing now. So
absolutely.
Thank you for not thinking I'm so weird that you're never going to invite me back. I'm happy to be back. And this time, it's a lot more exciting. I remember last year, obviously, when we talked, it was not great. So
we were down. It was a bummer. Second half of last season. Yeah. And we're like, you know what? What a great road trip. What a great homestand. We're coming up on a potentially great homestand. This is just a great time to be a Cubs fan. Time to bring Cody back. Let's bring it so we can have some fun talking about Cubs in a positive light now. This is great. So let's dig in. Pat, we'll start with you. It was a successful road trip. We were spot on with our predictions last week.
Yeah, again, 5-2. For the road trip, 8-4 overall against the dead teams, or that's what I call them, but the bad teams that we've been playing for the last couple of weeks. And really, that's all you can expect to do, I think, realistically. I mean, that is like 108 win pace or something. You know, I mean, that's good baseball. The Cubs went through. I did complain a little bit yesterday, I admit, because the Cubs had played like 9 consecutive games where every game had been decided by 1 or 2 runs. And there wasn't a single game where I didn't think we were either going to for sure win or for sure lose, regardless of what the outcome actually was. But then the Pirates, being the Pirates, kind of gave us a little bit of a rest here the last couple of days, and that was very kind of them. And the Cubs are coming home to play Milwaukee with, 8 games over 500 now. They're 4 over 500 when they started this period the last 2 weeks, and they've doubled that, so they're 69-61. Unfortunately for us, the Brewers are on a red hot streak themselves.
Unbelievable.
Which was not part of the plan.
No.
So the Cubs actually did lose a little bit of ground somehow out of all this, but there's no time I'd rather play Milwaukee than when they're like on an 8-game winning streak or something, because, you know, baseball being baseball, they're due to cool off. So despite going up against their best pitchers, I fully expect the Cubs will fare quite well this week.
Well, we will get to previewing the week, talking a little bit more in depth about the Brewers. But first, I do want to talk about the annoyance that was last week. You mentioned it, Pat. Some of these games were infuriating. Cody, this Tigers series, the Cubs went into Detroit. They did take 2 out of 3, but man, was it annoying. Every single one of those games.
Every single one of them. The first one they lost, I felt like they kind of just they didn't. I don't remember what they were with runners in scoring position or whatever, but oh my God. And the thing was they actually got the pitching, and it was something that once Marcus Stroman, dropped that he was going to, knowing when he's coming back, you're like, okay, if you can get the pitching somehow, some way, this team should be able to win all these games pretty easily, because the offense has been the big thing here in the second half of the year. And it just kind of the opposite happened. We got a little bit of a taste of what we saw a lot in the first half, which was good pitching, but the offense was just inconsistent. That's what I felt like this whole week was, except for today when they winning 10-1, and even a little bit of yesterday, even though Wesneski kind of gave them a bunch of runs on Saturday. But as far as them against the Pirates. But against Detroit, yeah, it felt like a dogfight in a way. Like Detroit, they just kind of, I don't know how they were playing going into that series against the Cubs, but they got some young guys there. I don't know when they're going to be good again, but they did not let the Cubs just come in there and stomp on them. But
no,
I will say,
yeah, I was hoping to see more of what we saw in the last two games of the Pirates against these Tigers. We win the first game and they just pack it in, and then but no, that was not the case.
Yeah, I think wasn't the first game where Baez and Zach McKinstry like did some damage against us, and that's how they lost. I was in Vegas for the last 3-4 days, so I kind of forgot how those games went. But
yeah,
I know one of those games that happened.
Oh yeah, no, and it was incredibly annoying. It was good to get to Pittsburgh, and then it was another struggle, another 1-run win to start the series in Pittsburgh before losing by 1 run the next day, and then the Cubs got some news, and the big news was Jordan Wicks going to make his big league debut, and that was something
out of desperation because Drew Smyly is completely unpitchable.
Drew Smyly is absolutely unpitchable, and Marcus Stroman is still injured, and so thank goodness Javier Assad has emerged as a starter for the Cubs, and Jordan Wicks in his major league debut becomes the 4th Cubs pitcher since 1901 to strike out over 9 batters in his MLB debut.
And what an inauspicious beginning, by the way, too. Can we just talk about the first inning?
Absolutely.
Ball 1, home run, base hit, walk. I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to be. I had Caleb Killian nightmares already in my head.
Exactly the name. That's exactly the name I thought.
And then he got out of it, and he just cruised. So good for him.
Yeah, Cody.
Yeah, that was exciting.
Yeah, 5 innings. Sorry. No, he went 5 innings, 2 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, and then the 9 Ks. You couldn't ask for a person making their major league debut to right the ship in a way that he did after that rocky start.
He had a lot of pressure too on him, frankly, because it's not like the Cubs are fighting for 4th or 5th place right now. They desperately need Javier Assad and Wicks to perform because the rotation is kind of in tatters, and getting strong outings from both of them, 2 from Assad and 1 from him. In a 7-game stretch, 3 of the good starting efforts were by guys who, frankly, you weren't counting on at the beginning of the year to be in your starting rotation. That's for sure. So it was really important.
Yeah, I mean, you said exactly what I was going to say about Wicks in terms of just the situation. It's not like he's coming up with the Cubs selling it for the second half and focusing on development. Like, they're in a playoff race, they're in the wild card right now, and like every game basically matters. The fact that he came up, pitched 5 innings, struck out 9, not only like in the situation but also on national television. I don't care if it is the Pirates. To be able to do that in your major league debut is super impressive to me. So I thought it was a good spot for him despite all that, because if he would have came up and had to face Milwaukee or, maybe a team that has that's a little bit better, maybe it would have gone a little bit more rockier. So I was happy that they were able to slot him in against Pittsburgh this weekend, build a bunch of momentum going into his next start this coming week, probably against the Reds this coming weekend. And listen, I don't sit here and talk about or act like I know everything about the prospects or anything. All I really do is look at the highlights that the minor league guys put out there on Twitter, and I follow the social media platforms for all the minor league teams, and I look at the stats sometimes. Like, I am not watching the Iowa Cubs or the Tennessee Smokies or the South Bend Cubs on a regular basis. So going into his start, some of the guys that we all know that watch the prospects on a regular basis, they've said nothing but good things about Jordan Wicks. So I went in with some optimism on it. And, I know the numbers weren't glaringly awesome or bad or anything. If you look at the other side of it in his minor league career, they didn't stand out like ace potential, but it was good to see a guy that the Cubs drafted in the first round that's a pitcher to look that good. I know you guys know it's been a long time since the Cubs have been able to develop homegrown pitching at a consistent rate.
Zambrano?
Yeah, I count Kyle Hendricks just because there is so little of them, over the years.
He doesn't count. So,
right, yeah, technically he doesn't. And so you have, you mentioned Carlos Zambrano, then I'm thinking, okay, Mark Pryor, Kerry Wood,
sure.
you know what I mean? So literally I was, not even 10 years old during a lot of those, especially Kerry Wood. In 98, I was like 8 or 9 years old. So, so yeah, it's exciting to see a guy like Jordan Wicks and Javier Assad and, even some of the guys in the bullpen. Justin Steele is a homegrown guy, right? That's one of the coolest things about the entire season is just seeing the homegrown pitching. Albert Alzolay is solidified himself as a closer. It's exciting to see the homegrown arms going out there and performing it in games that matter. So to me, that makes me even more excited about the future and where the Cubs farm system is right now too. But even in the present, to see especially Assad and Jordan Wicks do it in a situation where, there's a lot of pressure, honestly, to perform, just makes me really excited for what's to come for those guys.
Here's a little trivia question for you. If you do pretend that Kyle Hendricks is was a Cub for life, or from birth, I guess, what do you want to call it? Even though they did trade for him, they did develop him, so you even give him credit for that one. And you add to that Justin Steele, who's a Cub farmhand, and Assad and Wicks. Now, granted, Wicks has only pitched one game, but that's 4 starters who came up through the system. The last time I can remember the Cubs having 4 starters who came up through the system was in 2004, when the Cubs had Wood, Pryor, Zambrano, and Greg Maddux. Now, in fairness, Greg Maddux came through the system, won 3 Cy Youngs after his Cy Young with the Cubs, and came back. But still, he did come up through the system. So, if you want to play fast and loose. But the Cubs have rarely had more than 1 or 2 homegrown pitchers at any time in the interim period of, 20 years or whatever. So, that is, I think, significant. And probably not the end of the run of guys who come up. Now, I'm not going to say that Jordan Wicks is going to be a mainstay in the rotation for the next, 10 years. But you know what? He came through in his first start, and that's all he could do, right? He's only pitched once. So I'll happily take that. And I think especially as a Cubs fan, having watched just the last 2 years, a little bit of a disappointment with the Caleb Killian scenario, the Hayden Wisniewski situation, and even the Keegan Thompson, drop off this year, and Brandon Hughes getting hurt. It's like a lot of the guys who I thought, aside from Steele, right, who I thought the Cubs would develop in the last 2 years and would actually really make a difference in this, in this 2023 season, are completely missing in action. So it is nice to see him back. Although, I guess Keegan Thompson isn't technically missing in action because he did pitch today for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, his first outing since May 17th, Keegan
which
Thompson
I guess is So that's a notable event. We'll see how that progresses with him. I find that to be one of the more mysterious stories of the last 12 months. He was so good for the Cubs last year, the bullpen, and we were really counting on him as a 2 or 3 inning guy. And he was so bad in spring training. And then the first month of the season seemed like his old self, and then wasn't. It was just such a weird thing. And then he went to the minors, and he was bad in the minors. And it's like, what is going on? And I don't know if you have any insight into that, but I'm just, I will take whatever we can get out of him moving forward, but I'm not necessarily counting on him, I guess, is what I'd say.
Yeah, I'd say one other name that you can add to the homegrown list is who's getting playing time is Palencia. He's also made quite a few appearances this past week as well. So
yeah, no. As far as Thompson, obviously we need to see more. But yeah, I have no idea what happened. The only thing I could come up with was that the velocity was down. Like last year, he was consistently touching, 94, 95, sometimes 96. And then this year it was like 92, 93, at least at the beginning of the year. Today I noticed him hitting 94 a little bit more consistently. So I think maybe something like that has something to do with it. I don't know. I'm not some pitching guru who knows what. I'm not Rob Friedman or whatever. I'm not the pitching ninja. But yeah, like it's exciting.
He was certainly down.
For sure.
His velocity went down. Although in April he seemed like he'd regained it, and then I don't know if he lost it again. So that's important though for him. He really probably can't afford to throw 91-mile-an-hour fastballs and be as effective.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah, obviously we need to see more. It was good to get him in there today in a game where it was a blowout. So he was so good, though, that struck out 5 guys in those 2 innings. Mm-hmm. I know it's the Pirates, but the guy is literally – on the cliff of having a job or not with the major league organization. For him to come out there after not being out there since May 17th, I mean, and do what he did. To me, it's okay, let's see, let's push the pedal on the gas a little bit more here and see what happens in his next couple of appearances. And then if they go good, maybe give him some high leverage. But the thing is the guy, the Cubs bullpen have, you mentioned Palencia. They've used him in high leverage a little bit. I know he's got some walk problems, but he's got great stuff. Throws 100 miles per hour. Leiter, Jr., and Merriweather have been mainstays as setup guys all year. And then obviously Alzolay is just really taken over the closer role. So if you get Keegan Thompson, quote unquote, back here at the end of the year, it's so big for this bullpen moving forward that, Hayden Wisniewski, is that the only guy that you can sit here and complain about the Cubs bullpen right now? Probably. And he's someone who's also had good appearances, just been inconsistent this year, I think.
When he's bad, he can be brutally bad.
Right. Is it too simple to just say put some glasses on Wisniewski and Drew Smiley? Is that the problem?
If it's that simple, then you get those guys some glasses immediately, man. I do think the glasses thing is an intimidating factor.
I like it. As a guy who wears glasses, I'm in support of this. Yeah.
I don't know about the two of you, but I will say watching, and I know they've had some injuries and they're kind of depleted, but boy, the Pirates look awful, don't they? I mean, I know that they started off so well. We had their main guy on our podcast, and that was the kiss of death. Then they lost 20 games in a row after that. They've just been so bad. And I'm glad the Bears took advantage, or the Bears, sorry. right season, wrong team. I'm glad the Cubs were able to take advantage of that the last couple of days. But boy, they just and that's why I'm cautious about ascribing too much to what maybe a Wicks or a Keegan Thompson has done, or even a Seiya Suzuki in this series, because the competition has been really AAA level, to be honest with you. So it will be fun to watch them, moving forward here. But the Pirates are just, and unexpectedly so, I guess, just a real dead team, and they've been so bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they got some nice pieces there, like Brian Reynolds. He's solid. They'd be a lot better if O'Neal Cruz didn't get hurt.
Right. And
Mitch
Davis,
Keller,
the catcher outfielder, and you're right, Keller.
Oh, yeah. Keller, he won them the one game that they won in the series. They got some pieces there. It's just and obviously Andrew McCutcheon's there, but it's the back end of his career. He's not that good anymore. I don't know. I wouldn't say they're one of the worst teams in baseball.
Oh no, they're not White Sox bad, but they're bad.
Yeah, they're bad though. And this is kind of what I say to people is like, well, at least they're winning against these bad teams because that's what you got to do to make playoffs. So it will be interesting to see how they do against Milwaukee now with them on their winning streak, and obviously they're a lot more talented than any of the teams the Cubs played the last 2 weeks. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, Cody, because that was the story of the first half of this season was how many games did they leave off of the win column against bad teams? How infuriating was some of those Washington series where a Hosmer or a Mancini cost you at one or two of those games, and they lost. They gave up some games to some bad teams, and the margin for error in those games was so small because the Cubs could not score runs, and that's why it was so frustrating. Like in the month of May, I think the Cubs scored more than 6 runs in a game twice in the month of May. They scored 10 runs each the last 2 days. Like they could not score at all to save their life.
And the bullpen wasn't figured out in May, too. They blew games.
Right.
You mentioned the May 17th appearance, the last appearance that Keegan Thompson had. They led 6-1 in Houston in that game, and Keegan Thompson came in and blew it. I think he came in with a 6-3 lead in the 9th inning and blew the game. They lost on a walk-off in walk-off fashion to the Astros that day.
I remember that night. I was at Murphy's for that. It was a Tuesday night. That was my birthday. I was very, very pissed. I was very, very upset that night because that was just you. As soon as the Astros scored like 2 runs to make it 6-3, and knowing they're the Astros with all the talent they had and how the Cubs were playing, it was like, oh man, are they going to be able to get 3 outs in this one? And you didn't know who they're going to bring in to be the closer or to close games out because they still hadn't figured that out. Going back to what I was saying about how they hadn't figured out the bullpen yet. And we watched it play out, and it's exactly what a lot of people predicted. And I've said this all year is that it did take them too long to figure out the bullpen. Like, to me, coming into the year, they should have just given Alzolay the opportunity, in my opinion. I know that's in hindsight, it's easy for me to say now, but I mean, if Fulmer had never been a closer ever, but at least with Alzolay, first off, he was homegrown, and also he was young. So, and you tried to use him as a starter. It's not like the organization's never tried that with former starters before. I guess Ryan Dempster is a good example. I guess I know it was a long time ago. Kerry Wood,
Kerry Wood. Like I don't know. I know it sounds bad in hindsight, but.
Great minds think alike. I can tell you that this was something you could have thought of back then because
in fact, our preseason predictions for who would lead the Cubs in saves this year, even with Michael Fulmer as closer, was still Albert Alzolay.
This guy predicted that right here.
It's just like that's actually just like one little like nugget into like. Sometimes this year I felt like the fans have actually known more than the front office in some things. And that is one thing. I feel like we can all confidently sit here that we all thought Alzolay deserved the first chance to be the closer.
Yes.
And now he's the closer and he's excelled in it immediately. And maybe if you started the year.
Third choice because you had Fulmer and then Boxberger, right?
Oh my God, yeah. And it's just like, what are we doing? And so like that's one. I think we all were right about Christopher Morel being on this roster earlier in the year.
Absolutely.
Like there's so many things that I'm like, Cubs Twitter or Cubs fans were right about some things. Like I like the front office. I'm not out on them in any aspect at all. But like this year, it's really been like, we know more than you guys. Why don't you just listen to us? You know what I mean? So
I do feel like there are still going to be some. Potentially anyway, some longer term ripple effects from some of the things that they didn't do earlier in the year. For example, when the Cubs signed Hosmer for his stellar leadership and played him at first base for 100 plate appearances. The problem was not just that he was bad. It's that they never really had an opportunity to give Matt Mervis those at-bats. So now the Cubs have a guy in AAA who apparently can hit AAA pitching, who did come up at one point, but but really, I think he had 99 plate appearances or something.
Yeah.
Played poorly, but played at Eric Hosmer poor level, right? And we don't know what they have next year at first base. So that, and they don't, and maybe the lack of bringing him up is really their way of saying they're not counting on him either. But you need to know those things moving forward for the future, especially with the whole Bellinger situation, which I guess we could talk about. He had 5 RBIs today. He's got the team lead. He's got 75. Yeah, he's got a OPS of 900 and something. He's an all-star. Unfortunately, with the news this week, Jeremy, about Ohtani's arm injury and the need for surgery and how he's not going to be able to pitch for a year.
Devastating. That's so sad.
I feel that, and for us as Cubs fans, we wanted him in our rotation next year, and it looks like he won't be. But then the question becomes, well, what about Cody Bellinger? Because he's the next probably biggest name out there next year in free agency among actual people who can swing a baseball bat. And I wonder now, the Cubs obviously need to re-sign him. I think everybody feels that way. But my concern is that are they going to re-sign him to play first base, or do they want to play center field? Because I think center fielders are worth more money than first basemen with his offensive profile. And so if the Cubs are going up against other teams in free agency who are like, oh, we want him at center field, you would think they would pay more money than if the Cubs are going to get him to play first base. And that would, presuppose the Pete Kerr Armstrong being the center fielder. So the Cubs are in kind of a bind there. Like I could see, you signed a long-term deal and after like 3 years or whatever, maybe you shift him to first base. But there are going to be teams out there who are going to look at him as a plus value center fielder. And there aren't a whole lot of those guys out there, by the way. There never are. And they're extraordinarily valuable and extraordinarily expensive. And so the Cubs are going to be in this weird spot where they're going to have to pay him to play a lesser position, but pay him more money, I guess. Or they're going to say, oh, that's too much for a first baseman. And then what do we have? Then we're in big trouble. So I don't know if you've thought about that or what you're considering.
I actually haven't thought of it that way. I've just been, I guess my mindset is like, as much as I'm high on PCA, and I'm sure you guys are too, Cody Bellinger is a proven major league talent. He's won an MVP. Yeah. He's leading this team in almost every offensive category, I'm assuming, and he looks to be back at an all-star form, arguably MVP form, and especially since July started. And he's going to get paid a lot of money. But to me, it's like if you plan on really, really just beginning your true winning window, which coming into the year, most people thought 2024 was going to be the year where they really would try to win if some things played out and you got some answers about certain guys. Like Cody Bellinger's got to be here, because if you remove Cody Bellinger from this roster, you don't have any superstar players. And I think PCA can be something like that one day, but like to put that kind of pressure on a young kid like that immediately. I mean, Chris Bryant was basically that, but he also had a full year, his rookie year, where there wasn't pressure to be like one of the, to be on a winning team, right? Like next year there will be expectations, whether Cody Bellinger is here or not, I think, because I think that they, especially if they make the playoffs, the fans are going to want this team to be, World Series contenders next year if they make the playoffs and maybe win a series or whatever. Obviously, all that's got to play out, but I think that it'd be you're not, the Cubs aren't helping themselves if they let Cody Bellinger go, and they're not like it. To me, it just doesn't make any sense to not do whatever it takes to bring him back. And I think the DH certainly helps. You can play him in the corner outfield on days that you're going to play PCA, and then you can DH Seiya or Ian Happ. And I like those options at DH better than I have anyone else playing DH on this team this year, to be honest with you. I know they're great defensively, but Bellinger is also great defensively. So I don't think you're really losing anything there. I guess
I will say this. You talk about if the Cubs lose Bellinger, like what their offense looks like next year. The Cubs can barely afford to lose Candelaria next year, let alone Bellinger. I mean, the offense is finally at a what I would call a respectable playoff
Yes.
level, and
Yeah.
that's frankly still missing a corner infielder.
Mhm.
And frankly, the Cubs catching offense next year is still up in the air, if depending on what happens to Gomes, if he leaves or not. But you look at the lineup, and it'd be nice to add a piece, not lose any more pieces to what they have right now, and that's a real.
I agree.
I would hate to see that, as you say, as they approach their window, and it does look like they've got some guys coming up, especially pitchers who can be helpful. Pitchers are so much easier to integrate into your team anyway than hitters are, and lineup guys.
Yeah.
But I would really. I don't think they have enough, even if everybody in the system comes up and plays pretty well. You don't replace what Bellinger's done this year. It's very difficult.
No.
Yeah, and I think another thing too is like it's tough with Happ and Seiya Suzuki. Like they both have a no trade clause, I believe, in their contract.
Yeah.
So it's not like they can just trade those guys now. If they tried to and they asked Happer and Seiya like what teams are on the list that you would be okay with, like I don't know. That doing something like that would make it easier. But I just don't think they're going to trade Hap after giving him that extension. And then Seiya, I know he's been up and down this year, especially in June and July. But I don't know where you're going to get any value for the guy either, because he just hasn't consistently been good enough outside of the defense. The defense has been the one thing this year I think that has been way better than last year, at least. And somehow, some way, he basically has this. He's already almost reached the same WAR he had last year too. So in a way, he has been better than last year, but he still hasn't reached. He hasn't played at a level of like, what we saw in Japan, which it's hard to transition to Major League Baseball compared to Japan, unless you're. I mean, even Ohtani kind of struggled. No, not struggled, but I think Ohtani the last handful of years has been the best player on the planet. But even when he first came over, first couple years he came over, obviously had the injury, the Tommy John in 2018, and like he wasn't grabbing people's eyes like he does now. And so maybe Seiya Suzuki takes that, begins to do that in the last 3 years of his contract. I'm open to seeing it play out, but if you asked me if I'd rather see that be played out or the Cubs do whatever it takes to keep Cody Bellinger and be able to play him every day, I would take that over seeing what happens with Seiya Suzuki. But again, no trade clause. I don't know how you move that or any team or get any value in a trade either, just because 3 more years on that contract, and he's just been fine, but not like.
I would say that Suzuki and Happ are frustratingly okay.
Yeah,
they're not really bad at anything, but in combination as your corner outfielders, they've combined this year for 11 fewer homers than like Pete Alfonso, right? Like they're not the big boppers. They're like Ian Happ is good at drawing walks, right? That's his strength. He's a 241 hitter who draws a lot of walks. And that keeps his OPS plus over 100. He makes him a slightly above average hitter. Suzuki is basically a slightly above average hitter. And, between the two of them, their defense is okay. I mean, they're just okay, right? And they're not what I would call holes, but like on a team that you would expect to compete for, if not a championship, at least, to advance in the playoffs. Seiya Suzuki should be batting like 6th, right, or lower, right? And Ian Happ has to be somewhere where I think they just have to come to terms with the fact that his strength is just getting on base, but usually by walking. So not the 3-hole, right, but someplace, maybe lead off, I don't know, or the 2-hole or someplace, but that's his strength, and they are a little bit hamstrung because they've got guys in the minors who can actually hit for probably more power, who are going to be on their way up here soon. Yeah, they've got the center field, conundrum where they've got their best prospect as a center fielder, but also their best player overall as a center fielder. So it is frustrating. And then you say, well, they have to have power somewhere else because it's not second base or in shortstop a little bit, but you look at first and third, and you think, well, I mean, if they don't have Candelario next year, that takes away some of their power at the corners, and so I don't know. Like as you said, it's hard to figure out how these pieces are going to come together. I'm going to enjoy the ride this year because I think that the lineup this year is probably offensively as good as it's going to be for the next year. So I don't think next year's offense is going to be better than this year's offense right now. Now, this year's offense earlier in the season was awful, but what they have right now,
Yeah.
I think is as good as it's going to get for a while.
And they will need the offense to produce here in the next 3 games against the Milwaukee Brewers.
I think you're going to say 30 games, but okay.
No, these
Also
are key. These are key here. You only have 6 more shots. The Chicago Cubs have 6 more shots against Milwaukee head-to-head this season. These 3 in Chicago, 3 in Milwaukee to close the season. So this is an opportunity to make up a game or two here, and they really, really need to do it here this week because you mentioned it at the top, Pat. They are coming off a hot streak. These Brewers, they lost 3. They were swept in L.A., as we hope they would be. And then next thing I know, I'm looking up
they
and
stop losing.
They stopped losing. They sweep the Rangers in Texas. They come home and sweep the Twins, who are deceptively not a good team, but are in like the worst division ever. So they're actually not as good as they appear to be. And then the Padres, who can be good, but they're weird. And so like they could be good, but then they're bad sometimes. And now here they are losing. The Padres lose 3 in Milwaukee. So Milwaukee just can't stop winning. And it makes it. I'm ready to see them cool off a little bit here, Cody. Hoping for a cool down.
Well, I think Patrick said it earlier. I mean, they're due for a loss, man. I think if the Cubs are going to win this series, they got to win tomorrow because you got Burns and Woodruff the last 2 games. Thankfully, you got Steele in that second game. So they have, I think when you look at it from a starting pitching matchup, their best chance to win one for sure is tomorrow.
Miley. Yeah, Tyone and Miley.
The Wade Miley revenge game, I guess. I don't know how you guys feel about Tyone, but I do feel like he's been better since the start against the Yankees before the All-Star break. He in that stretch, he also has a bad start against the Blue Jays, but and against these bad teams that they had to face, I think he was fine. The last start, I think, was against the Tigers, gave up that grand slam. I know on Cubs Twitter there was a lot of arguing on whether he should have came out or not. I was actually okay that they left him in. Just the worst possible result happened, and sometimes that's just baseball. He had 5 no-hit innings going into that 6th inning where he gave up the grand slam. The Cubs went on to win anyway. It was an annoying, close win. It's weird that we are saying some wins are annoying, especially how things have gone the last handful of years, but that's where we're at. And for Cubs fans right now, I feel like, because every game matters, but also you're trying to give the bullpen a little bit of a rest and win some easy ones. And the Cubs had an easy one that day, and they almost blew it. So I guess for Tyone going into that game tomorrow, I feel okay about it. Obviously, Brewers are better than the last 2 teams he's faced, so we'll see. But this is why you paid for the guy to at least be serviceable against these good teams. And I know it's not been a great season from him, but to me, he's at least on track to finish the season strong. I think the fastball, that 4-seamer, is what's really if he's able to locate it, I think that's when he's going to be good or not. Because when he's not locating it, he's either giving up homers or walking guys. So
no, I think you're spot on about how important winning tomorrow's game is for the Cubs. Because you have Burns and Steele on Tuesday, which is that'll be a fun pitching matchup here. And then Wednesday, Woodruff and Hendricks. So that's a game where you may not like your chances. So it makes the Monday game even more important, Pat.
So Tayon, you were right. Going into that Yankees game right before the All-Star break, did have a ERA on the season of 6.93, so not optimal. And he
Not
pitched really
great.
well. He pitched really well those next 6 games and got his ERA down to 5.17, which doesn't seem like much, but it was for this point of the season was quite a bit.
Yep.
It has been a little bit rougher the last 3 games because he has given up 16 runs in 15.2 innings. But I still, like you, have hope. In some of those games, he pitched pretty well for long stretches of time, and then, a big hit here or there may have done him in. I'm really hoping that he gets things righted because whether or not he beats the Brewers on Monday or not, I don't think the Cubs rotation is going to be strong enough down the stretch without him pitching at least, as like, say, a number 3 middle of the rotation kind of guy, because they just don't have enough around him. I think for him to, if he's going to be the 6.90 ERA guy, the Cubs are cooked. So not to put too much pressure on him, but we do need him to pitch. I mean, in fairness, he is making quite a bit of money on a 4-year deal. So let's hope he does that. But you're right. I think this series, if the Cubs can, that's what we call stealing a win, that first game.
Yeah.
And then, you have a toss-up game with Steele and Burns, and then you've got Hendricks, who you hope. The nice part about the Brewers is, and maybe I'm biased against the Brewers, but I still feel that even a Hendricks, who is, sort of in the dusk of his career, and certainly Steele, can go up against weaker lineups and pitch quite well. And I view the Brewers lineup as a really weak lineup. So if you say Burns and Steele are both good pitchers, I'll take the Cubs offense over the Brewers offense in a heartbeat. And as long as we don't give up throw fastballs down the middle of the plate to that annoying Christian Yelich, I think the Cubs are in really good shape because the lineup for the Brewers is brutal. So
when I think back,
optimistic.
When I think back to the series they had in Milwaukee before the All-Star break, I mean, it was so annoying in the 2 games they lost because they were getting beat by guys who you were like, who?
Yeah.
Like,
how is this? Who is this?
I will say Yelich was, he was probably in the middle of his hot stretch, the hottest stretch he's had in a handful of years.
Since I put a curse on him.
Right, yeah.
Which I did, and then he fell off a cliff. After he called out Yu Darvish, I put a curse on him. Jeremy, you and our listeners are witnesses to this.
Yeah, we enjoyed tracking his fails over the past year plus.
Same.
Delightful.
That's one thing all Cubs fans I think have enjoyed doing. But you look at them and it's like, okay, they got Yelich. Willy Adames is a fine player, but he's not. I don't know. He's not anything that's super scary. Rowdy Tellez has had a down year. But then they have like some of those young guys like Joey Weimer, who's kind of like a boomer bust guy. They called up Frelick, I think his last name is, that, he's had some big moments for them.
Sal.
But there's Sal. Yeah. I'm probably missing some other names too, but they've just kind of gotten some contributions from guys that you're like, who are they? But
we know Rowdy Tellez is due to hit a home run off the Cubs anytime we play them, just because of bad luck. And of course, William Contreras could also do some damage against the Cubs because,
his brother.
It's a family thing. Yeah.
Just because of the family thing. That's it. I can't believe I forgot to mention him. He's had a pretty solid season for them there.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's more than solid because everybody else is so terrible other than him and Yelich. Like, they're the only 2 players in the entire lineup who you would even register as average or above. That's how bad their lineup is.
Yeah.
And
it's been like that for a while. They just hit a lot of homers, but they also strike out a lot too. So it's weird, but their pitching is what carries them. I'm surprised they've been as good as they have been to this point. But again, they got
a real shot in the arm though, right? When Woodruff came back, because he was out for the entire first half of the season pretty much, and now
They did pick up Carlos Santana too, who is like 37 or whatever. But I mean, he's hit for his entire career. Like I don't know. They're just annoyingly good in the, like, honestly, they just kind of remind me of the Cardinals, like when I was a kid and most of my life. I feel like that's how they've been good the last handful of years. Just they have one star player, and then they just it's like they piece it together with glue, and it somehow works. I don't know.
Oh, I thought you were going to say through sorcery. Okay,
That's
that
that's
too.
how the Cardinals
Sorcery,
do it.
Yeah. Except for this year, thankfully. Yeah.
So looking ahead after the Brewers series, the Cubs will then play 4 games against the Cincinnati Reds in Cincinnati before coming back home for another homestand with San Francisco and Arizona. Looking at the schedule, the last day off that the Cubs had was back on August 17th. They won't have another day off here. They'll have a day off on the 31st and then the 14th. So this is a stretch where they don't have a lot of time. They're playing a lot of tough teams now in September. The calendar's about to turn here after this Brewers series.
They had
September.
3 days off in a 7-day period, and now they get no days off. It's such a weird schedule.
Yeah.
And September is tough. So this is it's not an easy stretch as they get the Giants, the Diamondbacks, the Rockies isn't easy, but then you get the more Diamondbacks, and they are competing for that final wild card spot. So they're a tough team as well before wrapping it up with Atlanta and Milwaukee. So it's a not an easy month of September ahead. So looking at these 4 games against the Reds, this is your chance. This is the Cubs' chance to put the Reds away. So that they don't have to
be bothered. The
Reds
Reds are bad.
Yes.
Aren't they? I mean,
they just lost 3 or 4 to the Diamondbacks, right?
Right.
Yeah. By the way, I have a bone to pick with the Diamondbacks. They were supposed to be bad in my mind, and the Cubs are going to have this wonderful stretch where they played Arizona, Colorado, Arizona, Pittsburgh, and Colorado, and just sweep through September. And now Arizona, these 6 games against the Diamondbacks, or 7 games, I'm sorry, against the Diamondbacks, right, are going to end up, in many respects, might have more of an impact on the Cubs' playoff hopes than the 6 games against the Brewers.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
they are like it. They were hot going into the All-Star break, right? And then they were bad after the All-Star break trade deadline, especially after the trade deadline. They made some trades at the deadline, then they went on a losing streak, and now they've won a bunch in a row, or not in a row, but they've won a handful out of however many select games, and have played well enough to get back into that last wild card spot. Yeah, they've been a surprise. They're definitely, I think, they were kind of looked at as what many thought the Cubs would be this year, like, maybe win 75 games at most. And, Corbin Carroll has been a big part of their winning. Also, their pitching is pretty solid with Zach Gallen. But when they do play them, I hope that the Cubs just completely demolish Zach Davies. If all things else fail, if they just demolish Zach Davies, at least I'll have that. So I'm actually going out to Arizona for when they go out there.
Oh, that's nice.
In September. So I'm excited.
The fact that Davies is even in the starting rotation with a 6.93 ERA and a WHIP of 1.6 tells you that he may not be there by the time the Cubs play them, but the Cubs should exact some revenge on him after what he did to the Cubs.
Yeah. Also, because of him ghosting his now ex-wife or whatever that storyline was, he kind of deserves. He deserves all of this.
Yes, absolutely. And this is why. Go ahead, Pat.
I was just going to ask Cody. Do you when you look at the National League, and obviously winning the division is ideal, and we all know the Brewers situation. The Cubs are 4 back. They play them 6 times,
right,
et cetera. And whatever advantage the Cubs had in the schedule in the second half, they've kind of utilized that already. So now it's, they're going to be playing a decently hard schedule the rest of the way. But leaving the Brewers aside, the Phillies are only a couple games ahead of the Cubs. Arizona and San Francisco are sort of on their heels. I guess theoretically the Reds are too. Mm-hmm. How do you see this all shaping up? If you had to guess today, how these next 30 or so games go.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think the Cubs are going to be looking at on the last day of the season and saying, "Well, I hope they lose," or I'm glad we're going to beat them out because we just clinched yesterday or something.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at the wild card, my bold prediction coming into the year was that the Phillies weren't going to make the playoffs, and for about 4 months, I looked kind of smart. But Trey Turner has finally started to perform for them. Their pitching has been good. Harper is back. All that.
Yeah, Harper's way back, isn't he?
Oh,
right. Yeah. And Schwarber, he's having a down year, but still a down year with 36 or 37 bombs, whatever. I look at the wild card situation. I think Philly's going to end up just keeping that first wild card spot. It would be awesome if the Cubs could somehow, sneak past them, but unfortunately they don't even have a tiebreaker because Philly, I think, won 5 of the 6 games against them this year.
Yeah.
So,
and they also get to play the Nationals and Mets, I bet. So,
yeah. So, I mean, I don't know about that first spot, but as far as, who might, come in there and get that last spot, if it's not Arizona, I'm still kind of intrigued about Miami just because they do have the pitching, and Jake Berger's been a really good addition for them, but they're 3 games out of the final wild card spot right now. I know they're kind of ahead of schedule too. Like they weren't necessarily looked at to be great this year. And, for the first half of the season, they were, they're only a game above 500 right now. But, as we've seen before, teams get hot when things really turn up. They're kind of a team that is, they've lost 7 of 10. So right now they're not playing great baseball, but all it takes, especially with how close this wild card race is, all it takes is a good week and you're right there. So I'm kind of intrigued about Miami still. I'm pretty much out on Cincinnati. Like the way the Cubs beat up on them the last time they played, it was kind of telling that it's like, okay, you guys have been a fun story. Ellie De La Cruz is going to be a monster in this league for years to come. It's going to be funny when you guys don't pay him and he goes to the Yankees in like 6 years or whatever. Great. Matt McClain's probably he's right in there in the NL Rookie of the Year race. They've had a bunch of like rookies just come up and be great. And, they had one of the top farm systems in baseball. They should have some guys come up and be great, but they just don't have the pitching. Because they don't have the pitching, I don't believe in them. San Francisco, they have experience. And, they're a game and a half back. They have struggled in the second half though. So this entire everyone except for the Cubs and the Phillies in this wild card race have been inconsistent in the second half. Like the Cubs have been one of the best teams in the second half since the All-Star break ended. So they've consistently been good. Right. Yeah. And then the Phillies, they're in that first spot for a reason because they've been playing really well too consistently. So it comes out of those 4 teams I mentioned, and maybe I'd lean on San Francisco more so than the rest of them just because at least there were a little bit higher expectations for them this year. But again, they've lost 7 of 10 too. So like I don't know. I kind of hope that maybe it's the Reds just so I can say that, oh, wow, the NL Central wasn't the worst division outside the AL Central. But, I just don't believe in their pitching. I think it'd be Arizona or the Giants to get that final spot just because, I do like how they just kind of piece the team in San Francisco together and somehow are good or at least competitive. So Arizona, they got some guys. I don't know if they can hold on. They've just been, especially in the second half, they've been either hot or cold. So can they be consistently good down the stretch? We'll see.
2 of the
Here's
teams,
a little annoying. Real annoying fact for you, real quick. Both the Phillies and the Marlins in the last 2 weeks of the season play 10 games against the Mets and Pirates. I don't know how that happens, but they both do.
Yeah.
So that's it's gonna be tough to catch a Phillies team if they're playing teams that have long since left the arena. Sorry,
yeah.
Jerry.
I was going to say the reason we're the best pre-game show in the business is because we do so well in our predictions for the week that will be. So we are going to look at the upcoming 7 games: 3 against Milwaukee, 4 against Cincinnati. Pat, we'll start with you. How are the Cubs going to do in these 7 games?
Well, it's a little tricky because we don't know who the pitchers are going to be in half the Cubs-Reds games because neither team has announced any. But I'll say that's an advantage Cubs. Taillon pitches twice this week. Wicks will probably have to start against the Reds in one of these games. We're going to be playing at Cincinnati, and one of the games is a doubleheader, the first one. So
Correct.
Doubleheaders usually end up in splits statistically. So I'm going to say the Cubs end up in these 7 games. I think the Cubs are going to be 4-3.
That feels right. Cody, what's your prediction for the week?
I think the Cubs are going to take 2 or 3 against the Brewers. That I have my homer hat on, but I legitimately think that they will
it's
do
absolutely
it.
Possible, yeah.
I think that they will do it just because they are playing well going into this series. I mean, some people might say that they're not just because some of those games were kind of a struggle for them. But, hey, they won the game. I just feel like Wrigley Field's going to be rocking for this series, and it's going to feel like a playoff atmosphere, and we just haven't had that, and I think the players will answer to that, and you'll get some surprise performance out of guys that lead to you winning series sometimes. So I also like Kyle Hendricks going up against the Brewers. He's been good against them in his career, so I'll take 2 out of 3 against Milwaukee. And then I just don't believe in the Reds. So give me 3 against the Reds out of 4. So a 5-2 week. If the Cubs go 5-2 this week, I'm going to be insufferable on the internet, guys.
Hey, if the Cubs can play a doubleheader at Cincinnati, then the Saturday game, and then on a Sunday, which is not their strongest day, if Taillon can wrap up the week with yet another win, his second of the week, yes, the Cubs will be 5-2, and I will be also insufferable because I will pretend that I said they were going to be 5-2. I'll change my name to Cody legally, at least for a week, and that's how I'm going to roll.
Yeah, no, it won't be easy, but I do think that they, at the very least, can go 4-3, like you said. But optimistically, I think the best they could do is 5-2.
I'm not usually the most optimistic guy, but I'm with Cody on this one. I'm feeling a 5-2 week, Pat. I do think 2 of 3 against Milwaukee is possible. I love that you brought up how the atmosphere is going to be rocking. It's going to feel like playoff vibes for the first time in a long time at Wrigley Field. So I think that will be infectious for the players, and I think that'll be just a great atmosphere, and they're going to win those games. And then I do think a split on the doubleheader, but then they win the weekend because the Reds are I don't think they're good enough, and they're in September, and they're packing in. They're looking ahead to next year already, I think. So that's where I'm with you on the 5-2 week. I think
I will happily surrender my 3-week winning streak of predictions here if the Cubs want to exceed my expectations. But yeah, we will be there on Monday. We are bringing Ronnie Woo with us. Please don't get mad, but that's just an agreement we had made a while ago. So here we are.
We will be in the bleachers. So if anyone is in the bleachers, come and say hi.
If you see Ronnie Woo, we'll be within a few feet of him.
Is it left or right field? Where you guys sit?
Usually left.
Nice.
Usually left.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to, before the stadium was redone back in the old days, I used to be a huge proponent of what I called the center field bleachers, which were just to the right field side of the green kind of batting, canvas, because that was the shortest section, and it was less annoying having people pass by you. And we used to have many a day where we would have fun with the likes of Gary Matthews Jr., Michael Tucker, and whatever great center filders the Cubs had in that era. But no, we've migrated as we've aged to left field with Ian Happ and the guy from Nisi Lounge and Jeff and everybody in that side. So that's where we're at, and we're not apologetic.
That's good because I have a right field sucks t-shirt from Obvious Shirts. Like I'm full on. You're never going to get me to sit in right field. Never.
I did once get a San Diego Padre outfielder removed from the game because I was taunting him. And he looked back as a ball was hit and missed it, and it went for a double. And his name was Mike Darr, and his manager pulled him out of the game because he had completely lost it due to our needling. I won't tell you what we were saying or how we knew what we knew, but
No, it's
we had
a family
insider
show.
information.
Yeah,
we had insider information that was not pleasing him. Biographical information. So anyway.
Well, see, now you can use this skill, though. Like, one reason I like sitting in left field is because I do go to a lot of Cubs Brewers, and Christian Yelich will be out in left field.
Very much so. Yes.
I've been out there for a lot of those games, guys, and I'm telling you, there's a lot of things that I can't say into this microphone that are said out there to him. So I'm just... You guys can join that.
I know how Pat feels about Christian Yelich. Things will be said.
I did. I was with my dad on opening day last year, and when he struck out in the ninth inning, that was the game Kyle Hendricks pitched, as you said, Cody, one of his great games against the Brewers. We were in the second row behind the Brewers dugout. So as Yelich came back, I said, "You couldn't see the signs, I guess, huh?"
Yeah,
at me.
That's hilarious. Couldn't see the signs. Yes,
that was day one of his 7-year contract extension.
Yes.
Well, time flies when we're having fun talking Cubs, and we've had a blast having you on, Cody. Please remind all of our listeners how they can support you and follow CHGO.
Yeah, so you can follow CHGO Cubs on Twitter at CHGO_Cubs. I'm on Twitter at Cody_CHGO. I'm also on like Instagram and TikTok too. And I know Threads kind of died and I haven't logged on in months, but I'm also there. And then CHGO Sports YouTube channel. That's where all our live shows pre and post every day during the week. We do go live 5 days a week. Corey Friedman and Brendan Miller, they always do their one show per week on Sunday. And then it's me, Luke, and Ryan, Luke Stuckmeyer and Ryan Herrera, the other 4 shows during the week. So again, on CHGO Sports YouTube channel. So just go hit subscribe if you're interested. And if you're into other Chicago sports too, I know before the show we were talking a little Bears. Bears season's heating up and our Bears team's really good. We got a lot of exciting stuff going on regarding them and some tailgates we're doing this year. So again, just go subscribe on YouTube. If at all, if nothing else, if you're not interested in me at all, but you're interested in CHGO, go subscribe to CHGO Sports on YouTube.
Like I mentioned, we're the best pregame show. They're the best pregame and postgame show. So that's how you want to do it. Come to us first, go to them before the game and after the game. And we definitely... we've had Ryan on the show already. We've had you on the show, and a couple of you're a repeat guest now, and and of course Jared Willis, also a frequent contributor to this podcast and that show as well. So definitely, and we've Corey and Brendan have been on here as well a bunch of times. So good. All just a good crew over there at CHGO, doing good work.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun, man. It's always fun to talk about the Cubs for a living. I can't say anything else that makes it sound any better. It is. You are quite literally
living the dream, Cody.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
So we'll have to have you guys in studio sometime because I know you guys have had Jared on. You just mentioned you had Corey on and Brennan and Ryan, anytime. And obviously I've been on twice. We'll have to have you guys come in studio, maybe in the off season or something like that.
Love it. Yeah. There's you can also follow us on all of those same social media platforms at Wrigleyville Nat. And we also have a Patreon. That is how we keep this show ad-free every single year. 4+ years of no ads because of our generous patrons over at patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation. We thank every single one of them. We don't have to do any ads, and that's because of you, the listeners. And if you cannot support the show financially in these times, we understand that as well. Word of mouth, telling your Cub fan friends about the show, show them how to subscribe to a podcast. We're available on every single podcast platform you can imagine. We're also on YouTube in audio fashion. There are people who consume podcasts via YouTube. I support you. Continue to do that. You can find us there as well. Wrigleyville Nation Podcast on YouTube. And with that, we are going to wrap it up. We're going to call it a podcast. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.